Former First Lady Michelle Obama, she has a new podcast with her older brother, Craig Robinson, and it's not doing as well as some people thought. Here's why the former First Lady's latest project might actually be a rare misstep. What's going on, everybody? It's Professor Zeus, and I'm back with another video. If you found your way on this channel, just know I greatly appreciate you. Why don't you go ahead and hit subscribe? We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers, and we are taking it the humble route. So, today we're diving into something that's been making some news waves or ripples, if you like to use those words. Former First Lady Michelle Obama and her brother Craig Robinson, they just launched a new podcast called IMO, which stands for In My Opinion. Now, if you've been on Twitter or YouTube lately, you might have seen the numbers. I believe it's been about 52,000 for the first video that yesterday, and currently it's about 16,000 views with the guest Issa Rae. For a former first lady with millions of Instagram followers, that's kind of rough. So, what's going on here? Is Michelle Obama not as popular as she used to be? Why, launch this now when she and Barack already tried a podcast back in 2019? And what's with all these low views? Let's break it all down. Hit that like button if you're ready, and let's get into it. So, yeah, Michelle Obama, she announced this new podcast with her brother Craig, and it dropped yesterday, produced by their company, Higher Ground. The idea is they're tackling life's biggest questions with celebrity guests like Issa Rae. That's the first episode.
Like the crisis would require an emergency session.
Oh my God!
Like somebody's on a train.
Yeah, flying.
Right? There's.
So it's currently at about, let me scroll down, 16,000 views. So it's supposed to be essentially like candid, relatable, maybe a little funny. But here's the thing, the first episode is only at 16,000. The episode that, like it was just her and her brother, it's about 52,000. And that's, kind of like the intro, what to expect with the video, what to expect with the podcast. But this is like the official first episode, and it's at 16,000, right? 16,000. Now, if we go over to the First Lady's Instagram, we can see right here it says 56.8 million followers. So you have to ask yourself, how does someone having 56.8 million followers convert into 16,000 views? That's not a lot of views, right? That's like bad reach, bad engagement. And she posted some video with her and her brother on Twitter that had like 1.5 million views, but it's like that's not translating to the actual podcast. People are, hyping her up like, you go First Lady and things like that, but they're not the ones who are clicking over to watch. So I'm trying to figure out what's the disconnect. Obviously, we're still pretty early into the whole podcast. We can still, see what she can do in the future, but we have to figure out why this isn't hitting like it's supposed to be, right? This is like, the first Black First Lady, right? So you would think her coming out with, a podcast would be, I don't know, kind of in vogue right now, like popular, like people would want to hear what she has to say. Because obviously she was like a cultural icon, during, President Barack Obama's presidency, his last two terms. Her book Becoming sold millions. She was on every talk show literally, and people were legit begging her to run for president in 2024. That was a real thing. People really wanted her to run. But it's 2025 now, and then that shine that has kind of faded, and she's not in the White House anymore, and the world has essentially moved on. Trump, he's obviously back in the headlines and different things like that. New celebrities are coming up trying to make ways for themselves, and maybe people just aren't as hooked on her story as they were a decade ago. And then there's a lot of headlines, things in the press, about her and President Obama. A lot of divorce rumors. He's going to basketball games solo. The Trump inauguration, she wasn't there. And people keep asking, like, where's Michelle? Where's Michelle? And I'm not saying that's why this podcast is not doing so well, because obviously these are just rumors, but it's not helping her stay in the spotlight. Her star power obviously is still there, but it's not what it once was. You know what I mean? And launching a podcast with her brother, personally, I didn't even know she had a brother. I'm personally, I did not know she had a brother. I don't know if a lot of people knew she had a brother. I don't know if this was really the right move to make, right? Now, why is she doing this now? Because I just did some research, and let me pull this up. So it said back in 2019, Barack and Michelle Obama to end exclusive podcasting deal with Spotify. Reports say Barack and Michelle Obama are leaving Spotify amid reports of frustration over the terms of their multi-million-dollar deal to exclusively make podcasts with the streaming giant. The Obamas announced in 2019 they would partner exclusively with Spotify to release podcasts through their media company, Higher Ground, in a deal rumored to be worth $25 million. Right? And the name of that podcast was the Michelle Obama podcast. His was Renegade, right? So I guess they each had their own podcast. And obviously this was a big deal back then. Spotify had said it was projecting it to be, one of their most successful original, content platforms for people over 40. But then it kind of fizzled. You guys saw this in this article coming from, what was this? They did one season, 9 episodes, and that was it. And President Obama's his own Renegade didn't blow up either. Canceled it. Like I don't know what else to say. And if you compare that to a podcast giant like Joe Rogan, he's racking up millions of downloads per episode, constantly renewing his Spotify deal like clockwork. And Michelle and Obama, they try to compete in that space, and they just couldn't keep up the momentum. So why come back with another podcast in 2025, right? Is it that she's trying to reclaim, that media space, or maybe it's a passion project, but doing it with her brother Craig, who's the executive director of the National Association of Basketball Coaches. So shout out to him. But he's not exactly a household name. You know what I mean? It feels like a weird flex when her last one with the literal former president didn't stick the landing. But obviously we can be real. Being a content creator is hard. Obviously now I'm trying to, do this as well as, keep on pushing my professional career and my business. But pushing out content is hard. It's a hustle. It's a grind, and you can't just slap something together and expect views. I'm always constantly trying to test different things, look at how some people reacted to some of the videos I post, cross-reference that with certain topics, different things like that. I'm always strategizing, testing different things to see which strategy will work best for me, right? And obviously you guys have seen my last video or one of my previous videos, where I kind of broke it down how I was able to make so many subscribers within the last month or so. But all in all, it's still hard, right? You need strategy, you need hooks, you need thumbnails, topics people actually care about. And obviously, Michelle, she has the platform. You have 56 million followers on Instagram, 56 million. You have millions of followers on Twitter, but numbers don't necessarily mean engagement. Her podcast is averaging, with the first one having 52 and the episode with Issa Rae having 16,000, that's about like a 25,000 average. In views alone, total after just a few days. And for someone of her stature, I don't know if that just clicks right. You know what I mean? I checked it out. I watched a few clips. I watched a few minutes of it. And essentially the first episode is her and Craig reminiscing about growing up in Chicago And the second one with Issa Rae is just talking about friendships. It's okay. I mean, it's not like have you on the edge of your seat, like wanting to hear more, but there's no edge. Like, you know, I need to hear this factor. You know what I mean? There's nothing like that, right? There's nothing like that. And again, you know, bringing in her brother who's not a known personality, it really doesn't help. From my perspective, that is. People aren't tuning in for excuse me. People aren't tuning in for Craig Robinson. They barely know him, right? And if President Obama, if he did a solo podcast, people may be more inclined to check that out. He still got a little swag to him. You know what I mean? Michelle, obviously, she still has pull, but I don't know this format. I don't know if it's cutting through the noise. I don't know if it's something people really want. There's too much, you know, competition. You got the Joe Rogan podcast, Call Her Daddy, which other one? The Theo Vaughns. Who else? There's so many different content creators in the podcast space, right? Who are literally dropping videos that are getting, and then plus going up against streamers as well too. So it's real competition. You can't just float on by with just fame alone anymore if you want to, you know, be out there. So what's my honest takeaway from this? Michelle Obama's, in my opinion, podcast isn't a total flop. We don't know yet. It's still the early days, and averaging 25,000 views isn't really anything for someone who has the platform she has. You know, it's honestly underwhelming. Maybe her peak popularity is behind her. Maybe the, you know, the thing after the Spotify deal, maybe the timing is just off, or maybe it's just really tough to break into content creation without a real serious strategy. You know, I'm not hating. Obviously, she's still a legend in her own right. But I don't know about this. Honestly, I don't know about this. But you guys let me know what you guys think, right? Should she pivot? Should she stick with it? Should she just do it alone and leave her brother out of it? Let me know in the comments, man. Smash that like button. Hit the bell notification so you guys are always updated with all my videos. Subscribe. We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers. And, man, send this video to someone who might see some value in it. And never forget, it's you and I verse for a reason. I teach you, you teach me, and we both take what we taught each other and learn from each other and apply it to what's going on. That's the only way life can go on. Until next time, peace.